let's look at linear associations, or another one you'll hear is it called correlations. Really depends on your textbook, but you'll I might use those terms interchangeably, but they're synonyms to each other. All right, so here's a XY coordinate plane and a set of data. Okay. And so when we're looking at when it says associations, what we're asking ourselves, is there any kind of like pattern or anything that's kind of I can recognize? So if you look at this, you seem to kind of be moving in the same direction. And so the question is, could I use a line to represent the pattern here? And you can see here, the answer is going to be yes. This is what I would call a positive linear association. So what I can do is I can draw a line that would model the data, right? The general trend of where it's going. Okay. Something like this, you can see it goes down. This is what you would call a negative linear association because I could draw a line that is decreasing from left to right that models generally, right, what it's doing. It's not a perfect model, but it gives the general interpretation of how it's behaving. And then you can have some data like this, and there's no association. There is no pattern. I could not draw a line that is representing the trend and where it's going. Okay. So what we're looking at is associations, right? There's positive, negative, or there is no association. Okay. So either the data is increasing, that would be a positive association, or the data is decreasing, which would be a negative linear association, depending on how you interpret the information. So there's a little bit more of this. So let's look at the strength of association or correlation. So going back, this is the diagram I just showed you, right? We drew the line through it and we said, hey, this has a positive linear association. Well, if you look at this data, this also has a linear association. But if you look at it, the data points are not as close to the line as the first image. So this would be a weak linear association. This is a subjective term, but it's might be more accurate to say that it's weaker than the one to the left. So there eventually we will have a system for actually scoring how strong it is, but for now we're just kind of looking at the general interpretation. So that is a weak linear association. Then you could have some data that looks like this, and you can see that these are data points. Man, that line is right on top of it. And that would be a strong positive linear association. So you can have a positive or a negative association, but it also depends on how good the association actually is. So if you start from the left-hand side, that's a really, really strong correlation or association, meaning the points are super close to the line. If you go to the far right, there is a trend, right? The line does have a direction, but those points are not really close to it. Okay. Let's look at a negative linear association. So this is the one that I showed you in the very first slide or second slide. And then here's another set of data, and you can see it. Yes, this also has that negative trend, but it's weaker. It's a weak linear association. It's not that strong compared to the one to the left. And then if I take some data like this one is really, really strong, right? They make pretty much a line, and that would be a strong negative linear association. So once again, there can be a positive association, a negative association, and then no association. And then for like, look at the diagram that I have here, for negative association, there's different levels of strength or how good they really are. Okay. Another thing that pops up when you look at data is outliers. Okay. And there's different ways to look at it. We're going to look at it kind of more intuitively, just kind of look at the data. So here's a set of data. Okay. And then someone might jump right into this, say, okay, tell me the association. And they're going to see that data line right there. But the problem is that little point right there. So that point is outside of what the behavior of all the other data, right? It doesn't really fit in. Okay. So here's something, the same thing. People look at this, go, oh, look, I could draw that line right there. That's a negative association. But once again, there's this kind of point sitting out there by itself. And so basically an outlier is a piece of data that does not fit with the overall pattern of the data. So for example, where could this be? This could be like measuring height, right? There could be one person in the room that's like 6'7", and then the rest of the class, is not anywhere close. And that one person that's 6'7" is really going to stand out, right? If there's some sort of, like event and there's somebody who's a state championship cross country runner, their time might be substantially faster than the rest of the group. Um, and there could be weird situations with all kinds of data. So when it comes to data, we're looking for correlations, and then we're also looking for things that don't really fit into that data. And we'll talk later how this can actually affect averages and things like that.